Yes, indeed, it is. Once again, time for the Nikka Lifestyle Podcast, a happy Friday edition. I am your host, Kenny, and I am here with my lovely co-host, as always, and my beautiful wife, Nikka. Good afternoon, Nikka.
Hello, Kenny. Hello to our new returning listeners for our lifestyle podcast, Enthusiasm.
Yes, indeed, it is 2025.
That's right. And we are in the afternoon, which is a little odd for us. We normally do our podcast in the mornings.
Well, things happen, and, we got to keep it rolling here, as they say. We are trying to podcast early and often, but this one has been punted to the Friday afternoon edition. That's okay because there's no time stamp or expiration date for today's episode.
It's not.
You can really listen to it whenever you want.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty about podcasting in general.
I agree.
But we are going to date it because it is Friday afternoon and we are headed into a weekend action of NFL football, Nikka. Are you excited for any of the matchups this weekend?
Oh, that's right. We're in the playoffs.
2 matchups tomorrow and 2 on Sunday.
Go Ravens.
Ooh, yes.
Or the Lions.
Well, they can both win and get to the Super Bowl. I would love to see a Ravens-Lions Super Bowl.
Raven or the Lion. Who you think is going to win?
Bird? Lion is a bird?
Well, I guess so, yeah.
I think I got confused by the way you said that. I don't know. Let's see who gets there first.
Okay.
I don't know yet. Yeah, exciting stuff. It's so weird to see Detroit in the playoffs still to me, but I hope they make it.
I do too. They've been pretty good this season. They have a really good record, and I'm hoping it will be somebody different than the Chiefs.
Oh, yes, please.
Just to make it interesting.
With that said, go Texans tomorrow, I guess.
I guess.
Anybody but the Chiefs.
That's true, unless we're going to be able to do what The Flash has done in the movie.
What's that?
Multiverse.
Oh, Nikka. Yes, indeed. You have hinted on the reason for our arrival on today's podcast. I've actually been holding on to this one all week long because I saw this on Monday. And I knew I wanted to respond to this little article that came across my news feed.
Okay.
But on Monday morning-ish, I think I saw something from the director of the Flash movie from 2023. And spoiler alert, when I read this news flash, I had not seen the Flash movie yet. And really, it didn't really interest me. But as soon as I read this story and the headline, I knew that I wanted to watch it and respond to this.
Okay.
Because
it got a motivational...
It hit on something hard that you and I talk about a lot with modern storytelling and more importantly, what's missing, what's lacking when it comes to modern movie making and modern storytelling in general. The cinematic quality is there, I think. The audio, the cinematography, the skill that goes into making it. It's what's lacking for us is the storytelling and the plot and the pacing sometimes. We'll get into in a minute. But this director, I wrote down his name here. It's Andy Muschietti. Am I saying that right, you think? Andy Muschietti.
Okay.
It's a word salad there. Andy Muschietti, he went on a podcast. I'm guessing it's of the Spanish-speaking variety. Radio 2's TU, like I guess that's Radio U and U, E2 and U.
So was that a radio or was that a podcast?
It says Radio 2, but it's the La Balera del Coso show.
Okay.
That's where these comments originated from this director, Andy Muschietti, and his thoughts about why the Flash movie from 2023 that he directed was a failure at the box office. And by the way, the movie cost $200 million to make, and it grossed worldwide $271 million. So also interesting, a movie that paid for itself and also grossed
71
or made a net profit of $71 million is considered not to be successful nowadays.
I think it would have cost a little bit more nowadays to make, just with the inflation and everything else that comes with it.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, this movie was probably made in like 2021 or 2022 for a 2023 release. So
Well, it
It's
was during
already
the COVID.
it could be 3 to 5 years old pricing.
That's
And
true. I mean, it was announced in 2017, but due to COVID and budget other restrictions, probably it took a little longer to make.
yeah, who knows? It's also important, I think, to note that the Flash movie here is coming out like sort of at the end of an era of the DC cinematic universe. But we'll get into the whole history of that in a minute. I really wanted to try and keep the opening here to his comments, but the reason why apparently the Flash failed at the box office is because it didn't appeal to women. And in this case, he's referring to women of both above and under 25 years of age. And apparently, a bigger topic for the end of the show is the Hollywood marketing that got revealed sort of out of this conversation, at least from Warner Brothers, is that they divide 4 quadrants of marketing people into men and women and above or below 25 years of age.
That's it. Those are the markers.
Those are the 4 quadrants. That's what defines them. Age and sex. That's it. 2 variables. Seems very limited and doesn't seem to really capture the entire human experience. I think we're going to get into a lot of this stuff as we go, but to kind of put a cherry on this top conversation for now, I would just say the human experience seems to be a lot more varied than just our sex, and we are more than that identity, and that's kind of, you don't want to get into the whole identity politics game of life right now that's happening out there, right? But at the same time, it's like we are more than those basic things that we identify as, like man or woman and our age. We are much more complex than that.
Absolutely. And we have a lot more to bring in, too, to the conversation. We have our own experiences and what we like, dislike.
Well, Andy Muschietti thinks that women didn't care for the Flash movie or don't really care about the Flash character in general. So that was one of his comments that I wanted to respond to. And the other comment was basically that, well, I guess that was the comment, was basically that like the movie failed at the box office because it didn't appeal to women, and that's basically half of the marketing audience for Hollywood these days based on the 4 quadrants that we told you. And the first thing I wanted to bring up is this idea that like whose job is it to make a movie appeal to women? Is it the director's job? And then also we want to talk about these quadrants in a little bit more detail and why that maybe we're seeing poor storytelling reverberate throughout a lot of our movie experiences lately, more so than the positive ones.
Do you think the women didn't care for this movie because it is a superhero movie?
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know. Possibly. Let's be honest. Like the Flash is third tier here. We have Superman, Batman, and then the Flash. Like he's never gonna be Superman, and evidenced by this movie itself. But well, before we got into it, we needed to watch the Flash movie.
Yeah, we did.
We hadn't seen it. But a lot of his comments, we were like, hey, buddy, first of all, I don't like it when a director blames the audience for their flaws or for the failures of their movie, performance, whatever.
It seems to
It's
be
like, hey, it's your fault you didn't go to my movie. You just don't like the Flash. You didn't give him a chance.
It seems to be a reoccurring issue with a lot of new stuff.
It does. I'm really not a big fan of this. I feel like it takes more courage and guts to actually admit maybe your shortcomings and how you're going to improve the next time. At least you have a plan. True. At least you're not blaming other people. I would rather acknowledge where I come up short in hopes that you can convince somebody, why they should take a chance on you again. Why should somebody hire this director again?
It will be very refreshing to have a director that comes out and says, like, you know what? I dropped the ball right here or right here. I will do better next time.
Yeah.
That would be, own it.
It would be really refreshing. We don't get a lot of that in the media these days at all. We get excuses and finger pointing, and it's always the audience's fault.
Yep.
Anyways, we needed to watch The Flash, and we have thoughts after watching The Flash. I think some positive and some negative. But just to give you an idea of to summarize this movie, this movie is kind of out there, right? It has time travel in it. It has parallel universes in it. It has a lot of lore and history, I think, from the Batman, Superman universes sprinkled in, right?
Lots of nostalgia.
Lots of nostalgia, lots of pulling on those heartstrings, baby.
I think that was the whole concept behind this movie, to pull on his heartstrings to bring you right back.
100%. Barry Allen is also known as the Flash. His character is running at the beginning of the movie and breaks the time barrier, I guess, for the first time, and like runs so fast that he like basically freezes time and has this ability to sort of transport himself into other times and dimensions. And he realizes this and decides to talk to Bruce Wayne about it, who's played by Ben Affleck. And after talking with Ben Affleck, he doesn't heed his warning and he decides to go meddling with time anyways, because Barry Allen's mother died when he was younger. And his father is currently facing charges for killing her, and he believes his father is innocent and wants to just change everything back to the way it was, you know? Like, he wants this horrible thing to not have happened, and it all happened over a can of tomatoes, right? From the grocery store.
Yes. Simple enough plot.
Something that the mom forgot at the store led to this whole fiasco of her death and her husband being blamed for it. Barry Allen wants to go back in time and change that after he realizes he has this ability to manipulate time now. And of course, things do not go as planned. They go actually horribly, horribly wrong, right? He gets transported to he does make the change. He does go ahead and make this change.
But with that change,
with the change comes the consequences.
Changes.
Now he's created not a spin-off timeline like in Back to the Future 2. If for those of you who are familiar with Doc Brown's explanation on the chalkboard of basically the alternate 1985, that's not what we're dealing with here, because we are treated to a beautiful explanation in this movie by a guest cameo appearance of exactly how time travel works in this movie, where changing the past changes everything in that timeline: forward, past, future, now, present.
Creates a new timeline.
Creates a brand new offshoot timeline. And that's where Barry Allen finds himself returned to, including a 10, 20-year younger version of himself in this timeline, who does not even have the Flash powers yet and is about to actually get them. He's about at the point in his life where he's going to receive them. That's actually a plot point in the movie. They have to go and do that. And spoiler alert, they're successful. There's 2 Flashes in this movie. Okay. I teased the guest cameo appearance because we are treated to a cameo from none other than 1989 Batman Michael Keaton. Because of this whole offshoot new timeline parallel universe, Batman is no longer Ben Affleck in this timeline. It's Michael Keaton. This was DC Comics / Warner Brothers creative response to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness movie, which is a Marvel Comics movie. That movie featured 3 different Spider-Mans that have played the role over time. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and I forget the name of the newest one, actually, from Uncharted. What's his name?
Tom Holland?
Tom Holland, yeah. We get treated to all 3 Spider-Mans in that movie. And here we start to get a little treat of like different versions of Batman throughout the years, melding together with current superheroes. And like I said, it feels more like a response to that movie in particular, like, oh, we can do that too over here in DC.
It's a plot device.
It's a plot device. But it also is like an opportunity to, like you said, bring in some nostalgia, like a Michael Keaton Batman, to deliver some of those classic lines that we love, like, I'm Batman. Yep, we get it in this movie, everybody, and you knew it was coming before you even saw the black suit.
He says something else, some other line.
Well, it's not important, folks, because what is important is this movie has some big problems with it, us outside of the not being appealing to women comment that the director made. And the first one is the pacing of the movie completely is horrible.
First act? Molasses.
It's so long. It's so stretched out. It takes too long to get moving. Like, I took screenwriting classes in college where you learn like the structure of a story, and the movie act one is stretched out so long here. It's probably at least twice, if not almost 3 times as long as it needs to be. It's 50 minutes, and I know it's 50 minutes because we paused the movie. We were starting to yawn on the couch. We were getting sleepy, and we were like, let's just go to bed, and we'll just put it back on in bed, and we'll go from there. Like we both were resigned to the fact that we were like gonna pass out watching this movie in bed. I bring this up because, plot twist, we didn't fall asleep. We got into the movie after we moved it into the bedroom. And that just, to me, speaks about how painful the first 50 minutes were, where we're falling asleep on the couch watching it, and we, at 8:20, are like, let's go to bed. And we resume the movie by probably about, 8:40, by the time we get all the lights turned off, go to the bathroom, get toothies brushed, blah, blah, blah. Get all those last-minute adjustments before you put your head down for the night, and we resume the movie. And next thing you know, it's after 10, and we're both still awake, which is really rare for us.
Yeah, because we even talked about it after the movie ended.
Yeah, we're like, wow, well, how did that? It kept our attention. We were kind of shocked.
Yeah, it felt like watching almost 2 different movies.
Yeah, the first act was so painful, and it just is like, it's just bad movie making structure.
They could have taken out at least 20 minutes out of that 50 and still make it the same, impactful.
Yeah. And I would argue better. It would get into the better part of the movie faster.
Because to get into Michael Keaton character, you have to sit through the 50 minutes of watching the paint dry. And Michael Keaton character, or Batman, portrayed by Michael Keaton, is the best part of the movie.
Well, he also explains what's happened with the parallel universe, which anyways, so I thought that was worth pointing out. The CGI in this movie is awful. Spoiler alert, there's a scene where a lot of babies are falling out of a window, and the faces on them just look like, I thought I was watching a video game.
I thought it was
poor.
I thought it was some AI generated imagery.
Yeah, it looked terrible. I wouldn't be surprised if it was now. Yeah. It was awful. And then I also thought there was shots of Batman riding a motorcycle early in the movie, and it was clearly not like, it was an awful looking digital face. It was horrible looking.
There was few items there. In my personal opinion, there was way too much CGI for that movie. It was a filler throughout the movie. I don't mind the special effects and the flashes and all the bright lights. It's great. But when you start just putting that stuff just to put it in, it cheapens the movie. Yeah.
I thought, the scene with the babies falling out the window, one of the reasons why I don't like it so much is because to see everything the Flash is doing, they slow down time so much. And what this does is it winds up stretching out this moment of even all longer. These people falling out of this window, and it's like so long, and he's doing all this amazing stuff, and aren't we looking at it all? And it's so cool. And yet I would almost argue that losing the real-time impact of what he's doing, like, almost cheats us out of a funny moment, like, where we can kind of laugh it off, and be like, oh my gosh, the Flash is so, wow, how did he do that? Leave a little bit of mystery.
That would have been better than how they portray this.
And cut 5 minutes off your movie.
Yeah.
But I think they overthink things sometimes. And then also, how much did that sequence cost in CGI that was lackluster? I just thought that was worth pointing out. But I wanted to lean into some positives too, because like we said, the movie, once we got into bed, it got fun. Like, the action was fun. The action sequences I thought were really good in this movie.
That's true. And also the fact that it went back to the Future movie that kind of correlates to the same plot as this movie.
Yeah, that's worth mentioning for a minute. For people that don't know, the movie Back to the Future was directed by Robert Zemeckis, and they were filming almost half the movie with a different actor as Marty McFly named Eric Stoltz. Eric Stoltz is very famously the drug dealer in Pulp Fiction, whom John Travolta and he have to like resuscitate Uma Thurman with. And he's talking to John Travolta about using the stabbing motion with the adrenaline shot to give her in the heart and stuff. And it's really funny,
it's a fun scene.
If you're into like dark humor like that, if you're into watching people argue about how to inject a girl who's ODing on heroin. Anyhow, so Eric Stoltz originally was cast as Marty McFly, not Michael J. Fox, and they had filmed a bunch of the movie with Eric Stoltz, and you can see like outtakes and stills and other things to this day if you just Google Eric Stoltz Back to the Future, and it looks weird, like seeing like someone with just the same wardrobe exactly
as Michael J. Fox, but not Michael J. Fox.
Not Michael J. Fox, you know.
All right.
Okay, so they're constantly making fun of this in this movie because in this new universe, Eric Stoltz always played Marty McFly. He never got replaced.
They mentioned also Tom Cruise that didn't play Mission Impossible.
They mentioned a bunch of other 80s movies at some point, but one of them was like Tom Cruise was not Maverick. It was somebody. They had all basically swapped roles, you know, like all those early 80s
it was
action.
Cute. It was really fun.
It was funny. It was a funny thing. It was pretty well written, but it did explain kind of the time travel mechanics in this movie and stuff that they were totally operating on a different level, if you will. The other fun things I noticed in this movie are positives, if you will. The nostalgia, obviously. We've talked a lot about it, but they really lean heavy into it the more the movie goes on. Spoilers, but we start to see events from previous movies, like the Superman movie from 2013. The exact events of that movie are replayed over in this movie, but in a parallel universe with a whole different cast of characters. So you have like the same aliens invading Earth in that movie, but you have a different cast of heroes. You have a Supergirl instead of Superman. You have two Flashes there that weren't there in the original, and you have Batman 89 Michael Keaton there. So you have wind up having this ragtag group of heroes, I guess, mishmash, and that's part of the fun of it and whatnot, and it becomes a really good popcorn flick about 50 minutes into it. So.
Right, and they trying to put the Justice League or the band together with a bunch of other characters.
Yeah, exactly, and I think so. One final positive that I wanted to put on the movie is that I thought it actually had a moral. It's something that we criticize a lot of modern stories for. It's like hard to pinpoint like a basic moral to the story, whereas like I feel like this one had a really clear moral, like, hey, you shouldn't go messing with time, and they kind of put a nice bow on that at the ending a little bit, but they also like they just stretched out the whole intro and it just made it super draggy, and I just have to push back with the director a little bit and be like, hey man, if you would have just upheld to the principles of good filmmaking a little bit more and cut out the unnecessary waste in the first third of your movie or so, maybe more people would have liked it and responded to it. I don't know. I was pleasantly surprised by some of the second half of the movie, you know, like how much we liked it and how much it held our attention, and we stayed awake once we moved it into the bedroom. I thought that was very telling, and it pinpoints to him the exact problem with his movie. It took too long to get into. He made me sleepy. If I would have stayed on the couch, I probably would have fallen asleep and missed it. And then I don't know if I ever would have gotten back into it. But like for some reason, we took a break there. And all of a sudden it took off, and it was like a clear, here, this is the problem with your movie, dude.
Yeah, you're right, because if you were stated, we were so disengaged at that point, there was probably nothing like emotionally attaching us to that movie at that moment.
As a woman, do you think that the Flash is just an unlikable character? Because that's what he said. The Flash, women don't like the Flash, basically. That was his comment. That's what he gleaned from the fact that it didn't land with those two quadrants as we talked about.
I don't think so. I think he is a likable character. They wait way too long for his abilities, for his misbehaviors, his oddities to come up. Instead of just jumping right into the character and what he represents, they drag this on.
I was really felt like there was a comparison here to Peter Parker to be made for Spider-Man. You know, Spider-Man's a nerdy guy, like maybe not the most confident with the ladies before he gets his super abilities, if you will. Barry Allen, odd, kind of a nerdy-ish guy, I guess, a little bit.
It feels like all the superheroes are nerdy and superhero on the other.
I guess, but what I really wanted to say, though, is like, I think the comparison for me even goes a little bit further because Spider-Man's in college a lot and going through that time period in his life when we see him, and that's kind of where we see the Flash in this movie when he gets into the time period where the movie actually finishes. He's 20 years younger and he's interacting with himself from the new, anyways, it reminded me a lot of like Peter Parker first for some reason. Like
Yeah, but you can
and yet,
connect to Peter Parker on an emotional level.
I know they made him so much more likable.
Right. Somehow this character, you cannot connect with him. Or the struggle that he's going, it wasn't explained well, especially the death of his mother and the father being accused of that crime. I don't think that was explained.
It was very poorly explained.
Therefore, you couldn't connect to the character, what his problem is or what his struggle is in order to know what he has to do.
I think it should have been a little bit more clear cut, like I understand it's got to be a little bit of a
mystery,
convoluted plot device where you have like intricate things happening in the past that are changing and altering the course of existence, and they all need to be connected the right way and stuff. But I still think the way they showed his mom dying and like sort of framing the dad to be the killer and stuff was bad, and it would have been better if it was left up more of a mystery.
I really had a hard time following why is his father accused of killing his mom.
Yeah.
Yes, it's I didn't know.
It's weird. No doubt about it. It's not very clear cut. It almost would have been better if it was like the opening scene of the movie or something. Like,
maybe
to see from his perspective. I don't know. Like,
don't tell me. Show me what happened.
Yeah. We needed to see something more of that and less of some other stuff, obviously, because this movie was already long.
Yeah, that would have been a lot better.
I also feel like I think we have to be fair and also point out that the actor who plays the Flash has had some not so flattering media articles written about him, and particularly with his treatment of women, and there might have been some backlash to just wanting to go see a movie with him in general in it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that should be discounted, and the fact that he didn't mention a lot of that on here. But I still think that doesn't negate the fact that there's just fundamental filmmaking flaws with the movie when it's like, dude, you got to get into it more, faster. Yes. You got to get into it quicker. Okay. Aside from the actor's personal life issues, I also feel like society's just burnt out on superhero movies.
Yeah.
I think this movie, when you look at Batman 89 was 11 years after Superman 78. Yes, we had 4 Superman movies in the 80s, but it's like they wore that superhero out before they moved on to the next one. And then we had Batman a lot in the 90s, and then we had Spider-Man in the early 2000s, I remember. And then we got Batman again, and then we had another Superman movie, and then Marvel came finally into it. And before you know it, they had this whole cinematic universe built up, and DC is like, oh my gosh, we've fallen behind. We have to catch up. And they started making what I consider to be kind of poor decisions to try and keep up. And I don't know. I feel like, the best of DC was the Dark Knight trilogy that Christopher Nolan made, with Christian Bale and obviously with Heath Ledger playing the Joker and making that so memorable. And I just feel like they've gotten so far away from that, But the superhero movie fatigue, I think, is now real. We've had almost more than 15 years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's still going and trying to keep it going. And we now have this era of DC, which is sort of like kind of ended, I think, with the Flash movie, because there's already a new Batman franchise that's begun, and there's a new Superman that's starting next year or this year. So I just don't really know why they even made this Flash movie other than to just try and get that last nostalgia bite,
I guess.
And it just it just makes you wonder all these things. And
that's true.
So I think there's a lot that was happening that didn't get addressed. But that leads me to where I kind of want to end this discussion and what I want to talk about, because throughout all of this, our director friend here, Mr. Muschietti,
Mom spaghetti.
Interestingly enough, the whole time travel plot is explained with spaghetti in the Flash movie by Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne. So if you ever want to learn about what method of time travel they decided to incorporate into this film, you can looking forward to that explanation by Michael Keaton.
Oh, you don't mean you don't want to say you want to eat spaghetti?
He uses spaghetti in the movie. All right. But yes, Andy Muschietti, he sort of outed modern Hollywood marketing right? How do they, what goes into their thought about how they should be marketing their movies to the audience, us the audience, and us being just humanity, people that come from all walks of life and have so much varied degree of background and personality type, and you get it.
Yeah.
And yet we have him sort of outing them as thinking of us in such simplistic terms as like males and females above or below 25 years of age. That's really how they think of us. And I feel like this is reflective of the time period, and it wasn't always this way, Nikka.
The difference between somebody that's 25 and over, that could be 50, that could be 60, and those two people, 26 and 50, will have totally different ideas about a movie or what they want to see. Such a huge group of people into one category.
Absolutely. Terrible. I just think, though, the genericness in which they look at humanity is in and of itself part of the problem that's landed us in this, whatever's happened with Hollywood and movies and stuff. I think, theater attendance has never recovered since COVID. And I feel like humanity as a whole just decided we lived without going to the movie theater for so long, and they've just really done nothing to make me want to go back. I didn't miss it. I didn't feel like I was missing anything watching the movies at home versus watching them in the theater. This used to be such a group shared experience. We would want to go to a packed movie theater and see it with a crowd to react together and laugh together. And then we decided we didn't need that anymore in a sense. And they've been slowly trying to get people to come back to the movie theater, and only the real diehards of the cinema are the ones that are holding on to it.
And we also got a lot better technology at home. We get those big screen TVs, sounds.
100%.
So, and the comfort of your own home. Plus, when you have a movie like this that's 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours, 20 minutes, that's a long time.
It is.
And you most likely will get up in the middle to go either to the bathroom or get some refreshments.
Yep.
Where at home you can pause the movie and do the same. So there's 100%. A lot of factors.
The length is bad, but I feel like people need to understand that the way they're marketing this movie in these simplistic terms is also going into the script feedback before they even roll cameras on filming the movie. And I think that's a big change that's happened in the movie industry that didn't exist in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. That's sort of changed, is where all of a sudden marketing executives came along and decided that they wanted to have input into the filmmaking process, and they've never even made a movie in their life before. They know how to sell stuff. They're good at that based on their previous job experience. But all of a sudden they think that what makes them good at selling stuff is meddling into other people's processes. And I think that's why Hollywood is sort of facing an identity crisis, if you will. It's really time to focus on stories again. If they would have focused on the story of this movie, they would have gotten into the best parts of it a lot sooner. And guess what, by the way, when your movie is 20, 25 minutes, even 30 minutes shorter, you can squeeze in a couple extra screenings of it every day too for people. Yeah. I remember this was a reason to make movies under 2 hours at one time. So I think it's time to get back to the basics a little bit here of plot and storytelling, but also to look at marketing a little bit more in a complex way. And I think this is a good point in the podcast to bring up the fact that I used to work for somebody who used to think about these things in a lot different of a way. And his name was Lee Abrams. And oh, by the way, he happened to advise and even be a hired consultant for Disney and ABC in the 80s.
Back in the day, though.
Back when some of these things that we're talking about, we feel that are missing from modern storytelling a little bit. And his way of grouping people together is a lot different than just by age and by gender. It's a lot different. And I think I don't want to necessarily explain his entire philosophy here, but the fact that he looked at humanity in a more complex way and grouped us, he still groups us into 4 quadrants, but it's just more about generational things and when you came along and what's familiar to you. And that kind of like categorizes how you think about things.
Especially right now, because we are in the age of digital everything. There's a group of people that comes from analog, and those people get overlooked a lot of times.
Sure. I mean, his chart is not very complex to explain. It's basically you have analog and digital on one end, and you have culturally sophisticated and unculturally sophisticated on another end. And if you divide people on those lines, I think you get a lot more honest look at society than you do if you don't. And I'm not going to out other people, but I'm going to out myself and you, because I know where we fall in line. We fall in line with the culturally sophisticated analog generation. And when you look at what that says, it says we're cerebral, we're cultural media explorers. True. We're environmental. Ding. We're liberal, ding, and cultural tastes form, and liberal in the classic sense of the definition, please, not the modern media sense of CNN considers liberal, and because they're liars. Cultural tastes formulated when we were 16 to 20 years old, also probably true. That's us, and that's where we fit in. And Lee used to argue that not only do you need to pick a lane, and instead of trying to market your movie to everybody, you need to pick one of these lanes. You need to pick. You want to either be sophisticated or unsophisticated, and you need to cater to like the analog generation or the digital generation.
But there's a little bit of overlap in some of these categories.
There can be overlap, of course. When you look at a political compass, you'll often see like different people plotted on there, like of where they kind of lie on the political compass, if you will. And this is very much the same way. Like no one's gonna fall like in the far extremes of everything.
Maybe few people, but not in general public.
Some people will, yes, but not everybody.
Right.
And some people will also fall closer to the middle on all these things. And they will be sort of less of all of these points, maybe.
Okay.
Either way, the point is that the people come from all over the place. But if you hone in on one of these quadrants, if you will, Lee would argue that you should not try to appeal to all of them. You should only try to appeal to one specific quadrant. However, he would also argue that you need to offend the other 3 quadrants in some way. And I would argue that it's mostly true. I don't know if you have to offend them, but I do think you need to cater your product to the audience of your choice, if you will. And you need to give them a little to give them trust in you, and that's what builds trust in brands and identities over time.
Absolutely. By doing that, that doesn't mean you're going to offend the other 3 quadrants.
Not always.
Not always, but it might spark a conversation.
It might, and it also might keep things moving.
But also, to your point, I don't think this should be a divisive issue either, where we have movies right now that people just gonna start arguing about it online. I get it, it's still publicity, so maybe it's better that way. But the things that they do argue a lot of times is surrounded by identity politics. It's not about good versus evil.
Right. It isn't. All right. So I do want to stick on these quadrants a little bit, because I think it's really important that if we're going to see a shift in the movie industry, and if we're going to start to see things get to be improved, and if we're going to start to see just more consistent quality storytelling coming out, like we got to be honest about these critiques, like we got to be honest about the fact that like your 50 minutes of your opening act is twice as long as it should be. Start there when you are thinking about how to make your movie better and more appealing to the audience. Because I'm a white male and you're a white female, and we're both over 25 and we're both yawning at 8:20 after we started your movie at 7:30, only to go into bed and stay awake until after 10. So obviously the problem is not with us. We are more than able to be encouraged to stay awake. It's just you didn't give us any reason to the first 50 minutes. Pacing
100%.
was too bad. So you got to be honest with yourself and your product, and that requires,
Self-reflection.
being honest about like your movie and not necessarily falling in love with everything you shot every day. And I know it was hard work when you were there and did it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in the movie.
It's true.
Okay, so that's one thing I would look at. And the other thing I would look at is like just to try to zero in more on who you want to target your audience to be. And it cannot be as simple as what you're making it. It's time to hire the Lee Abramses of the world again, I guess, and get them back into marketing rooms, because you're just trying to bounce it way too broad of a net. You're trying to cast way too broad of a net.
Kanika Media Consulting Group is available.
We are. You can call us and we will give you all the details on how to market your products going forward. But in the meantime, I think call it out for what it happens. This article coming out on Monday this week gave us a golden opportunity to get into some of these topics that are, quite frankly, a lot of people don't want to talk about. And his answer and his to the problem is wrong.
Yeah.
And it needs to be called out for that. It's just flat out wrong. It's your job to craft a character who is liked by the demographic that the studio wants to like it. And obviously you totally dropped the ball when it comes to one whole entire sex. Like if women are just tuning this movie out.
And also it didn't help the fact that the character had issues with some women in his personal life. Also, the marketing, it shouldn't be involved in the creating aspect of a movie.
It should not. They should be
separate.
left out. They should watch the movie when it's done and be like, okay, this is how we're going to market it. They should formulate the plan based on what it is.
Exactly.
Not trying to make a movie that's so broad. Like that's part of the problem. Start to zero in on better demographics. Start to think about society less vanilla. I don't know what to say. Like everything, make it more complex. I'm sorry. I know it takes some thought. I know it takes work, but guess what? It's not
work.
supposed to be easy.
It's work and it's writing. It all starts with the writing. This movie had some funny moments, so it had some writing, but a lot of times it was CGI filler.
Yeah. There's so much, and it was bad CGI.
Yeah.
It was bad. Okay. Well, if you're interested in anything about the psychographic chart or Lee Abrams' way of breaking down humanity into 4 quadrants, you can Google that. There's a Billboard article about it from the 70s, believe it or not. This goes way back. Like I said, he consulted radio, he consulted TV in the 80s, and I would just argue that the industry used to think a lot more in line with how he looked at audiences, and they were not afraid to offend parents, for example.
That's what made good TV shows. That's what made a good TV in general, movies.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You had to take a stand. Now it's right in the middle. We cannot offend this group or this group because we're going to hurt their feelings.
We've gotten so far away from that, and yet everyone wonders, like, why doesn't it sell as like it used to? So
that's why
there is a link, believe it or not.
And people gravitate to these movies, to the older movies to watch nowadays.
Yeah, they are
because they are more interesting.
And they're better written. And they're better written because they don't have so much fluff and filler in the front half of their movies. Yeah. So, all right, everybody. Well, I think we've beaten this topic into a dead horse for this Friday afternoon, but I'm glad we were able to get it off our chests and get it in the can, as they say. Nikka, do you have anything to add about this topic since, you're the demographic that didn't like The Flash? I'm going to let you have the final word.
It's not a bad movie. If you can sit through the 15 minutes at the beginning, it's fun. It brings up some nostalgia. But at the end of the day, it's just a popcorn movie.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you. It's good popcorn, fun when it gets it right.
Yeah.
When it didn't get it right was the front 50 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, enjoy the NFL playoffs this weekend. I hope your team wins, whoever they may be. Go Lions, go Ravens.
Da bem.
Oh man, next year maybe. So sad, so sad. We don't even have a coach. Who knows when we'll have one? They're interviewing the entire world, it seems like. I haven't gotten my call yet, have you?
No.
Oh,
Are
well, they should
trying?
interview us. I mean, if they're doing all their due diligence, get a bargain rate. I could be a leader of men.
Yeah. Let's go.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will be back soon with either a lifestyle or a baseball podcast. Stay tuned.
Bye.